Microphones are coming on. Sound is available. It is coming through. Welcome to Bible study. This week with sound. For those of you that attempted...
We were trying to read your lips on TV.
No, it was for those of you that were watching last week. No, you were not having a stroke. We were not broadcasting sound. Now, for those who will look it up later, if anybody wants to go back and watch last week's, I recorded sound separately. Pastor did an awesome job of splicing the two together, the sound and the video, and then he proceeded to upload the one without the sound. So if you go to watch the new one that he uploaded from last week, you're still not having a stroke. There is no sound on it.
I was going to say, because we dropped in on it. Just came over.
Nope. Next time will be a charm. Pastor has promised that he will upload the one with sound. It's okay. It's February, or as we like to call it, extended January. It just feels that way. But I will do a quick review, though, of what we went through last week, just to catch us back up, because we kind of caught ourselves in the middle. It was longer than I think I thought it was when I put all this together. So we'll kind of talk about this section and where I think the lessons are going. This particular lesson coming between, once again, two discussions that Jesus has. And I remembered where we picked up this week because I put a little mark in my Bible last week, and unfortunately I put that mark in the wrong spot. Because I'm sitting there looking at it today, and I'm like, no, I think we left off right after the Canaanite woman, I thought. And I'm looking at the mark, and the mark's further down, and so I don't know what was happening last week, but apparently we can spiritualize it and say Satan was working against us, trying to make sure this lesson didn't come out. But, I think stupid was just working against us, and stupid is what happened. So with that, why don't we open up with a word of prayer, because we need all the help we can get. Father, thank you for bringing us all here today. Thank you that the weather was not as bad as we all had feared, that we were all able to make it out. Just watch over those that are traveling and moving around today. It's much better than we could have hoped for, but still slick for people. I ask you now to be with us as we get into your word. Focus our attention on faith, these lessons of faith, this section on faith, and the one that we have faith in. Let your Spirit guide us in wisdom and in truth. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. And I'm going to continue drinking my coffee. Oh, man. Plugged in, powered on. Good. So, last week we were working on this section starting in chapter 13, the end of chapter 13. And I told you it comes between sort of the second discourse, which was a lot about mission and apostolic authority. Why trust the apostles? Or no, wrong one. Third discourse, the parables. We wrapped up the parables, and this idea of giving us the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. We understand what heaven is doing. And then we get into this section, and I said, the first time I read through it, I'm looking through it, and it's all these little stories. Jesus going through and doing all these signs and wonders. John the Baptist loses his head. Just lots of little, I called it interlude number 2 at one point in my mind. But I still bring up the point, when you go through these sections, there's usually a theme or a purpose that's going through these between the discourses. They're not just random. And when I read through it 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 or 10, 20 times, I was like finally looking at it going, the one theme that keeps coming through here is faith. The word just keeps popping up throughout this section. Little faith, great faith, no faith. Faith, 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 faith throughout this section. Starts with this idea of no or little faith in Nazareth. He goes home. And he doesn't perform any of his signs and wonders. Why? Because he can't? No. But he's among people. They have no faith. They're not believing. Who is this guy? And we talked about the fact that, we had the extended story in Luke a little while ago about the fact that, not only did they not believe him, but they wanted to kill him. But that's okay. They just didn't have any faith. He didn't do anything. And it says he's out, and then we get into the death of John the Baptist. And we find out how serious this is. And with that, the tone begins to shift. And Jesus goes up. He's no longer close to Jerusalem even. He's headed up. He's in some very Gentile areas. But we work our way through various signs and wonders. He's doing miracles. He's performing miracles. And then we get down to this point here, and there's this story of great faith. And the great faith is shown by who?
The Canaanite woman.
Canaanite woman, the last person you're expecting. The last person in the story that you're thinking would have great faith. She's not an Israelite. She's not a person that would really, should, by any stretch of the imagination, believe. And Jesus even tells them, I didn't come for them. I was not sent first to them. I was sent to the children of Israel. And you're thinking okay, that's okay, but here is this faith, and even Jesus, it says he's amazed. Here is, so great is your faith, let it be done for you. So you have these stories of faith. So as a catechist, as somebody who's sitting and learning, you're going through all these stories. Now, it's not a rule book. It's not saying, all right, well, if you have good faith, this happens. If you have bad faith, this happens. No. We're going through stories, various stories of what's happening, what faith looks like, what faith doesn't look like. We continually have, the disciples. God bless them. The most human of people in the stories, the disciples. Every time something happens, it's like, Jesus, we couldn't make it happen. Why didn't it happen? And Jesus keeps coming back to them. You have little faith. The disciples, the apostles, the ones that should have it all together. These are air pinky quotes when I can't get my air quotes up. So we left off at the time with this story of great faith in the Canaanite woman. We have a couple of more little stories, but then we're going to pivot. It's going to take a pivot and it's not quite the middle. It's probably a little further than the middle, but we're going to get down to things like Peter's confession. Who do they say the Son of Man is? And Peter's going to confess, and we're going to find out. So the next stage of this faith is finding out who your faith is in. And it's what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to have confession. We're going to have mission next, technically. The mission is take up your cross and follow me. And then we're going to have verification of the confession that Peter gives. Peter gives a confession, and if that was all that ever happened, okay, good. Probably got it right. We would still believe it. But then there's verification. Transfiguration occurs. His glory is seen. So for those that are learning, that haven't gone through here, this is kind of the next, okay. Because you might ask yourself, why didn't they know, or why, would they have not known? Well, back in the Jordan, when John the Baptist was baptizing him, God speaks, this is my son, listen to him. And okay, but, how many times has God spoken and in one ear and out the other one before too long? It was an event, it was a thing, but this transfiguration is a verification of the confession. So we will pick up where we left off. It was just after the story of the Canaanite woman and her faith. Ooh, get comfortable. There we go. That's the light I like. So we pick up with verse 29. We're in chapter 15, verse 29. It says, Jesus went on from there after he had healed the Canaanite woman's daughter. It says, and he walked beside the Sea of Galilee, and he went up on the mountain and sat down there. And great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And they put them at his feet, and he healed them, so that the crowd wondered when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled healthy, the lame walking, and the blind seeing. And they glorified the God of Israel. Okay, so once again, all of the things Isaiah prophesied about, the blind will, the mute will speak, the lame will walk, the blind will see. He's going through doing these things, and he's doing them in is he doing them in Jerusalem?
By the Sea of Galilee.
Sea of Galilee, and we all know where the Sea of Galilee is.
It's to the north.
To the north. It's up to the more Gentile side of the world. Just asking the question. Sometimes we get into these things and we all assume everybody has spent some quality time looking at a map. No. Jesus is up north. Why is he up north? Anybody remember that?
Well, he left his hometown. Wasn't getting anywhere there.
Wasn't time
Oh,
to go to
he was-
Jerusalem.
They just beheaded John the Baptist.
Ah,
Yeah. We had where we started this story was
Probably didn't want to end his ministry so soon.
Yeah, probably not. No. But that's
so
correct.
he headed up there because it was not safe. You think?
It was, yeah, I mean, that'd be one way of looking at it. He heard about what happened. Obviously, attention had been focused on Jesus now because it says when Herod had heard about the miracles Jesus was doing, he's asking, who is it? And people are like, it's John the Baptist, come back. Well, not a good time to be there. So it just says, he headed up north. Okay, great. So he's up north, not in the center of Jewish religious life, not where you would expect all of these miracles to occur, not where you would expect to find great faith. And yet that's what he's finding. That's what he's dealing with. Now here it says, then Jesus, and the story is going to sound familiar. Before we fed 5,000 people. Now we're feeding 4,000. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion on the crowd because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I am unwilling to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. And the disciples said to him, where are we to get enough bread in such a desolate place to feed so great a crowd? Jesus said to them, how many loaves do you have? They said, 7, and a few small fish. And directing the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 7 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. Those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And after sending away the crowds, he got into the boat and went to the region of Magadan. So, almost identical to the story of the feeding of the 5,000. The thing that really cracks you up in this one is the apostles, the disciples that were with him, saw him feed the 5,000.
And still ask where
Where are we going to get the food? God bless them. And I say that again, not thinking that they're any different from the rest of us. Jesus would look at us and say, you would think the question they would ask Jesus is, all right, how are we going to do this? That's kind of not the question in the sense of like, how's this going to get done? We don't know how it's going to get done, but we can't wait to see you do it. Now the question is, where are we supposed to get this food?
I didn't remember the second time.
Yeah, they're both in here, and it would appear that the question pops up later as far as he talks about the miracles he's performed, and he mentions the 5,000 and the 4,000, so it's not like sometimes you think to yourself, oh, maybe it's a textual problem, like somebody wrote down the thing twice. like a bad exam. No, they're both in there. They both appear to be legitimate separate stories, and there is probably some deeper, hugely numerically significant thing to them. 5,000 versus 4,000, 12 baskets left over with the 5,000. 12 usually represents Israel. 7 baskets left over this time. I mean, 7 is a sort of perfect heavenly number. 7 lampstands, 7 things in Revelation, 7, 7, 7, 7. But I don't have that for you today. We just know he went through a second time, fed this crowd. Now, what I would point out is to what would a Jewish thinker be thinking about here?
Manna in the wilderness.
Manna in the wilderness.
Ah.
God provides for his people. It's another reminder that God comes and takes care. He feeds the faithful out in the wilderness. So, another hint as to who he is. And then when everything's going so well, who shows up?
Pharisees and the Sadducees?
Darn those Pharisees and Sadducees. Always there to ruin a party. All right. It says, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees came from Jerusalem. And to test him, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven.
This is after he fed 4,000 people.
Yeah.
They missed the party.
Yeah, they must not have been there.
He answered them, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. So he left them and departed.
What was the sign of Jonah?
Well, what happened to Jonah?
He got eaten by a whale.
Swallowed by a whale, but yes.
Swallowed, yeah,
It
that's,
was,
yeah.
it was a large fish, as my mother always used to tell us.
Large fish, yeah. We
not
use
Large
whale
fish.
for simplicity.
Okay, yeah, large fish.
Okay.
And then he-
Several things happened to Jonah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's he talking about here?
He was
Well-
No sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah.
So what connection do we have between Jonah and Jesus? What similarity?
He was saved.
He was swallowed, Jonah was swallowed by the great fish. He was in the belly of the fish for 3 days, and Jesus was in the earth
For 3 days.
and nights.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is what we're getting at.
My mother was a really good Sunday school teacher.
So the Pharisees and Sadducees are looking for a sign. He says, you're not getting another sign. You're not asking in faith. You're not part of the faithful. You're asking for parlor tricks. You're looking for something, so I show you something miraculous. What are you going to do then? They've shown throughout this that they don't believe, they don't have faith. He says you're not getting another sign, that no other sign is coming for you to believe in except the sign of Jonah.
So the signs that he did do, though, increased the faith of other people that saw it, don't you think?
Increase the faith of the faithful.
Right. That's what I mean, right?
Faith develops faith. Faith strengthens faith. Signs done for an unfaithful group, it's nothing. I mean, think about it now. I mean, believe half of what you see and less of what you hear about. We look at videos, we look at things we don't believe. That's a good thing. But, if somebody stood right in front of you and did something, that's a little different. Little different. But they're not coming. They're not coming to ask him because they want to believe. They see their power being threatened. They see troubles, everything they've believed, everything up to this point that they've asked about. It's like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why do your disciples not follow? That's what we just went through. Why don't your disciples follow the traditions? Wash their hands before they eat. And he's like, why are you getting into this nonsense? God has not given this to you. You've created this tradition. So, We get done, doesn't really answer their question, says, you're going to get one more sign. I'm sure they didn't hear it that way, but he says, you're going to get one more sign, one more thing put before you to believe or not to believe. The sign of Jonah. And I'm sure they're sitting there going, I don't know, what's the sign of Jonah? What's he talking? I don't know. It'll become clear. And it's going to become clear in here for us later on. But anyway, let me continue. It says, when the disciples reached the other side, they had forgotten to bring any bread. These disciples, who hired them? Like, really? These guys are not together. Jesus said to them, and you can just imagine this. The boat comes over, the disciples are like, well, we forgot to bring any bread. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Jesus says, watch and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they began discussing it among themselves, saying, we brought no bread. But Jesus, aware of this, said, O you of little faith, why are you discussing among yourselves the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive? Do you not remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many baskets you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many baskets you gathered? How is it that you fail to understand that I did not speak about bread? Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. God bless them. It's like a bless your heart situation. If we were more southern, maybe we'd just say bless your heart to these guys, because they're just...
It's hard to get through to a fisherman.
Yeah, maybe that's it. But, here they are. They've gone through all this. They've been intimately involved with this. It's not like they've been distant folks watching. They've been intimately involved with Jesus. And they're just not getting it. And there's also a thought in my mind that listening to Jesus must have been very fascinating. That he'd bring up probably, and we've all had this, how many times, if you've got children, how many times have your children accused you of coming up with a question or a topic or a discussion of something that you've been running in your head? You've ever had a wife or a husband come up to you and start in on something? They've had an argument in their head for 3 hours, and then they say something to you, and you're just like,
What are you talking about?
what are you talking about?
Isn't there an emoji?
Yeah, what are we talking about? So here, here's Jesus, watch and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they're just like, are we hungry again? What did we do? Where did we go? I mean, they're not there. And there is obviously a spiritual component, but I mean, you can just watch this happening. You got a boss or a spouse or somebody who just comes up with these left field conversations, and you're just trying to keep up. I love the fact we get to the end of it, and it said, then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
So that was their light bulb moment.
Yeah. Well, and it should be the light bulb moment for the students that are now sitting here and reading this, because we get into these discussions as well. It should be like, especially as Jewish believers who are going through this and reading and talking, and now it's like, hey, you got to watch out. They're going to sound good, they're going to have all this stuff, and it's not good for you. But I have to wash my hands before I eat. Well, some of you I will recommend go out and get soap. But the kind of washing they're talking about is nothing.
And the significance of leaven here for a Jewish convert. Leaven is bad. We want to get rid of that at the time of Passover. So
It's a corruption.
Yeah.
And not only is it a corruption, it's an infestation. It expands. A little leaven ruins the whole thing. It's considered a corruption and a bad thing. So he's saying, watch out for the teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because they're just not going to get you.
I was gonna say, what do we deal with that today? But we're aiming here to look at, this is a Jewish catechism. essentially.
So yes, but then the question becomes, we need to watch out, application. What does that mean to us? Do we have things, and I don't want to drag it into the Wednesday night either, but, do we have things that we adhere to that we place as laws and anchors around people's necks that say you absolutely have to do this or you're not saved? So that is the warning that we take from this. I mean, we probably do not have as many of these laws as they would have, but we have the same tendencies. And we're not just talking preferences, we're talking about things that we look at somebody and say, you have to do this or you're not saved.
If you're not Lutheran enough or something.
Yeah, I mean, there are just many, many things that we put ahead of his actual teaching. So we need to beware. And it's okay if we're a little slow. If the disciples were slow, we can be slow too. It can take us a while. Take a lifetime. Take an entire lifetime, and guess what? You still might not get there. It's only God that does the changing, the sanctifying, the holy making of us. So we pray, we ponder, and we read. All right, so now we come to what I think is the hinge in this section, because things change after this part. But this is very important. After he's told them to beware, he's done all these signs and wonders. We've seen faith throughout the land. We get here, it says, Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi. He asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And he said to them, but who do you say that I am? Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. Your flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. Okay. You got the big secret. Now don't tell anybody, at least not yet. Now is not the time. Christ reveals that he is the Christ. It's not for them to bring this secret out yet. Now the interesting thing here is he almost asks the question separately, who do people say that the Son of Man is? The Son of Man being a figure shown in Daniel, I want to say, is this sort of godlike figure. Son of Man, the Messiah, the one that they would be expecting. It's interesting that he asked that question. It's almost like, it's funny to me that he asked that question first before he asked them, who do you say I am? It's almost like he's like, okay, well, who do they think that this Messiah is going to be? And they're like, well, could be John the Baptist, could be Elijah, this representative from God. This is who we expect it to be. And he says, well, who do you say that I am? They're like, oh, you're the Messiah. Somehow they've figured that out at this point. And probably was said with absolutely no understanding of all of the ramifications. Sometimes we give answers that we know the right answer. Jesus. Without knowing why.
Well, it
So,
says here,
hmm?
the Father
Yeah. Yep. He tells them, yeah, you got the right answer. God has revealed this to you, and it's good that you know this now. So he tells them, you got the right answer. You know this. Christ being the Greek version for Messiah, the Savior, the one who is coming. But then he immediately tells them to tell no one.
Just kind of weird.
Do not put it on a poster. Do not set it up on a banner. We're not going to set up stands. Come and hear the Christ. Come and hear the Messiah. Not his time yet. Not the time for him to want to do this yet. And you may ask yourself, why? And that's the beauty of getting into this next section, because from here it changes. Here we're going to have, we just got confession. And like I said, I wrote these in the wrong order. We got confession, but this very next section, we're going to talk about mission.
Jim,
Yep.
before we go into that next section, why does Jesus then go into talking to him about the keys of the kingdom of heaven? And I tie this to the Lutheran teaching of the office of the keys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's the significance of him, Jesus telling that right in here?
You're asking me to figure out why God put this here.
How does it tie into?
Well,
Tie into directly.
I mean, there's some question of authority. He made the correct answer. And he's telling him that answer is going to have ramifications. You're going to be my representative. You're going to be my apostle. You're going to be my sent one. You are going to have this, you are Peter. This confession you just made is going to be the basis of what I am sending you with. And loosing and binding. You're going to be me. Now let's not get too
But
papal.
This was after he sent the disciples out in pairs.
Yep. Yeah, he had sent them earlier to do work, to go out to visit the people, and they did some miracle works, and they did some things. But once again, it's still like sending out an apprentice on their first job. They may get the job done. They may get most of it done. They probably do not get it done at a master level. They may not still understand every reason why they do certain things a certain way. It's not that it's bad, not that it's wrong, not that it's not there, but I mean, Peter put this answer out there because he knew his spirit was told, this is the answer. You are the Christ. And Jesus is all like, yes, you are correct. And this confession is what's going to bring us into this new era, the era where the kingdom of the church is going to come and it's going to be wonderful. And then he starts talking about dying. And Peter's going to lose it here.
When he says this, all the other disciples hear it too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they're all, this is in front of them. Just remember, Peter often is the spokesman for the group.
Mm-hmm.
You often hear about them in other places. You'll hear about them. It's like they all talk together, and then Jesus asks a question. It's like, okay, and Peter spoke up. Because Peter, once again, God love him, headstrong, walk first, think later. Whip out that sword, swing first, think later. He's an action-oriented kind of guy, which has to explain how later on in his life God changed him. How you go from the action-oriented, I'm in it and here we go, to the guy who wrote 1st and 2nd Peter, the guy who went out and spread that gospel. You can't swing first when you're spreading the gospel. I mean, you can, but it's not very effective. He had to change, and he changed because God changed him. But here we go. Jesus said, you guys got it right. You got the answer. Ding, ding, ding. You know who I am. And it says, from that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. There's that sign of Jonah you were looking for. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord. This shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Good old Peter. Just when we think we've got God's plan figured out, we hear something we don't like. We attempt to say, No, God, you couldn't possibly do that. And he says, Get thee behind me, Satan. There's no equivocation there. There is no doubt where that thought comes from. It is a thought of the evil one. No, you're not going to do this. You're not going to do what? You're not going to do the thing that is going to save the whole world. I'm not going to let you go to Jerusalem and die. What a sad, sad state we would be in had he not done that. But if Peter got his plan, that would not happen. No. We'll take care of business. And Jesus just says, Get back there, Satan. Oof, that's got to hurt. And you can't help but think a little bit about Peter in these situations. That poor guy must have gotten stung a few times over the course of his life. People who tend to stand out the strongest also tend to get hit the strongest. You know, he's right up front. He answers all the questions. He's wrong. You have to imagine, here he just got a good attaboy, and now a little way down the line, it's like, no. You are Satan. You are not thinking about the things of God.
Would that be understood by the Jewish people that Satan, would that be the name for the adversary?
The accuser.
The accuser.
Yeah, the one who acts against us or accuses us, or Satan, I think, is how it sort of works out. But in the book of Job, the one who accuses and says, I want to go torment Job. The one who fell from heaven throughout scriptures. The one who...
So that was literally understood by the Jewish believers.
Yeah, not that Peter was Satan, but that this idea is satanic. This is not a godly... We're no more than the other idea. The other idea was given to you by the Father. That didn't make Peter God. He's not accusing him necessarily of being Satan, but he's accusing him of acting as Satan would act. Just come and worship me, and all the kingdoms of the world will be yours. Yeah, here's Peter. Here's Peter saying, no, you're not going to die. You're not going to go to Jerusalem and suffer many things.
But you can't really fault Peter, of course, in the sense that, I mean, he loves Jesus as much as he thinks he can.
Yeah. I don't even know that it's a matter of he didn't think. I think it's a matter of he's not aware of God's plan. But for the believer who's being taught, you have to be taught that this crucifixion that's coming up, the suffering that we're going to get to at the end of this book, is not a random happenstance. It's not a thing that occurred because the Roman Empire was that much stronger, that his Jewish enemies were that much smarter. It's a thing that is occurring because he says he has to go and suffer these things. And you're going to ask yourself, why? Why does he have to go and suffer these things? But he tells them, this is the first. He says it 3 times before he goes.
Would the Jewish believers have been thinking by this point about the prophecies in like Isaiah of the suffering servant?
I mean, probably. I mean, if you've grown up listening to those things, if you've grown up to understand those things, then yeah, he's probably sitting there, you would think, what does he mean by that? So, yes. All right. So Jesus now makes it very, very clear. It says, Jesus told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So, if you had any hopes of thinking like, ooh, this is all going to give me a better life, I'm going to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, and everything will be great, my prosperity is going to go through the roof, everything's going to be wonderful and awesome, I just got to follow Jesus and do the right thing. That's pretty clear. Mission. You got to take up your cross and follow him. Once again, the idea of the cross, Jewish believers would have known exactly what the cross meant. Not a wonderful piece of jewelry that we all walk around with that you see on TV by atheist pagans and everybody else walking around and wearing them, but an instrument of torture and death. Instrument of torture and death for the least of those around them. I mean, generally as a Roman citizen, you could not be killed by crucifixion. You could be killed many other ways, but as a Roman citizen, that was the privilege of being a Roman citizen. You could not be crucified. However, for all the lesser people, crucifixion was not only a punishment, but a warning. Don't do these things. You will die a horrendous and heinous death. So here you go. You're following, who is this Jesus? Who have I gotten into now? Who am I following? And he says, you have to take up your cross. It's not going to be a life of ease. You're going to, what Peter thinks, we're going to put together a strong army. We're going to knock it. He's like, no, I've got to go to Jerusalem. You've got to take up your cross. You've got to follow along. Then he gets to the little saying at the end, truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Whoo, boy. So many things have been sprouted with that one little line in Scripture. So there are some who would say, some whose churches actually do say, well, that's replying to John, the Apostle John. He never died. We don't have something recorded. He's still around. He's still floating. Jesus loved him. He was immortal. It's like, no, not really. What I would say to you as we look at this, the answer is much more reasonable. What comes up next?
Praise God.
Well, but right next in this story, what is the very next story we get into?
Transfiguration.
So some of them will see the Son of Man in his glory.
Coming in his kingdom is what the New American Standard says.
Yeah, coming in his kingdom, but they will see. Got bugs in here now. Something flitting around.
Oh,
It's okay.
probably a stink bug.
No, I'll send it your way.
Yeah.
It's okay. All is good.
Oh.
It seems that this section is much more reasonable than stories of immortal men walking around the earth. But it's setting up this very next story, which is that you will see the Son of Man in his kingdom and in his eternal glory. You'll see it. Some of you will see it. 3 of you will see it. And that will be verification of all that we've talked about here so far. You'll see it. It will be heavenly. And that's that. So into this next section, we've all gone through this story. After 6 days, Peter took up with him Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He was still speaking when, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise, and have no fear." And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead." And the disciples asked him, Why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come?" He answered, "Elijah does come, and he will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. And so the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. Always the end when the disciples figure out what Jesus was talking about. So he's told them we had confession. He's told them what this job entails, what it means. It's not a Messiah that is coming to conquer in a glorious, violent way. It is a Messiah that is coming to suffer and die to redeem. Then we have this transfiguration. Peter, James, and John. Those 3 hang out a lot. He takes them up the mountain. And they said that they look and they see. And he's talking with 2 guys. Okay. Now you always have that question. How in the heck did they know
Yeah,
that he was talking with Moses and Elijah?
right.
It was revealed to them.
Yeah, it had to be, because they didn't have the trading cards. You would have looked.
Yeah, really,
You would
good
have said, I
Not
went
thought of that.
I went and looked through my patriarchs and prophets of the Old Testament cards, and I did not see Moses, I did not see Elijah. How did they know? It had to have been revealed to them. You know, or maybe God works with those little chyrons, those little things that go on the bottom of the screen on TV, and just had something there that said Moses, Elijah. What do they represent?
Moses represents the law.
Absolutely.
Elijah, prophecy?
Yeah, the great prophet of God. So here he is talking with the law, with the prophets. He's, and he came to fulfill the law and the prophets. So you have that going on here. And the disciples, once again, Peter speaking for the 3 of them, Peter, James, and John. Who speaks up? Peter. And he wants to do what?
Tabernacles.
Build tabernacles. It says build a tent, but we all know what the tents are. The tabernacle that God dwelled in. And they're like, oof, we should build a tent. We should build a place for you to sit and bask. It says Jesus was transfigured. It's hard to imagine that. But this heavenly glory, this white beyond white, this purity beyond purity shining in front of them, and they're like, we need to tabernacle this quickly. We'll set it up. This is...
They're thinking of the Shekinah glory in the temple.
Yeah, where God
Yeah.
dwelt.
Above the mercy seat.
Yep. And they're like, well, we'll build this, and God comes down. Does he come down as himself? What does he come down as?
Light.
Well, a cloud. And we've seen, where have we seen the clouds of God before?
In Exodus.
Exodus, all over the place. God's glory came down in a cloud over the temple, over the mountain. You know, so it's like, it's here. This is all very consistent. And he says, okay. And they're like falling down, because at this point, the glory of God in front of them is just too much for their little minds. You know, maybe they could handle Jesus. The glory of God in front of them is so much, they fall down. They close their eyes like, okay, we're going to listen. And then they hear Jesus say, you know, it's okay. Get up. And they look up. And there's Jesus, clothed in human flesh again. So they did. They saw the Son of Man in his glory. You know, in his kingdom. This is who he was. But now it's like, okay, that glorious moment, that mountaintop experience, whenever anybody talks about the mountaintop experience, this was it. It's now over. It's okay. And now we go back down the mountain to continue the work. And that work involves death. Let's not forget that. So he goes down. It says, when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him and kneeling before him said, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he has seizures and suffers terribly. For often he falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him. And Jesus answered, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me. Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was healed instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, why could we not cast it out? He said to them, because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. I'm going to wrap up this chapter here. As they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day. And they were greatly distressed. So once again, there's a second time he mentions, I'm going to die. When they came to Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma tax went up to Peter and said, does your teacher not pay the tax? He said, yes. And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, what do you think, Simon? From whom do kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others? And when he said, from others, Jesus said to him, then the sons are free. However, not to give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook and take the first fish that comes up. And when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for me and for yourself. Okay, so this will then wrap up this interlude before we get into the next discourse, the next series of teachings. So what do we have here? They come down from the mountain. They're going back to the work. We find that the disciples are still having troubles. Their faith is not doing the job.
So when Jesus says, you faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you? He's talking about the disciples, not the people.
Oh, I think he's talking about everybody. I think anybody who hears him at that point, it's like, I'm here. Now, whether he's saying this out of frustration, whether he's saying it as a matter of like, oh, how long do I really have to do things, to change things here this way before I've got to finish up what I've got? It's a little hard to say, but the thing I find funny about this is like Jesus goes ahead, he takes care of it. Then it says what? The disciples came to him. Jesus, they came up to him privately and stepped aside and said, so what the heck? Why couldn't we do this? Why couldn't we make this work? And he's like, you of little faith, because of your little faith. I mean, we've been reiterating this. We've been hammering on this, that, the lack of faith really seems to be the thing. And they're not having faith in who?
Yeah.
In him. That is exactly where we wound up. It's not just faith in faith. When he says you of little faith, it's not like faith in their own faith. Mm-hmm. It's you of little faith. You're not back to him. Faith in him. Faith in Jesus, the one who is the Christ, the one who is transfigured before them, the one who is bringing the kingdom back onto earth. Not just faith in faith. If I have enough faith, if I scoop enough faith up, put it in my faith wallet, and make sure I have the faith I need. It's like, no. If you had next to no faith of your own, but faith in him will do miraculous things. Faith in him is what moves mountains. Not just your faith or how you feel about your faith or the faith you have that day. We sometimes think of faith as a magic spell or a gas tank.
Could we imagine this today, that if I have a family member who's really sick, and if I have enough faith in Jesus, then I know the Lutheran answer to this, but the hope that if I have enough faith in Jesus, this person's going to be made well.
It's putting a lot of the onus on you.
A lot of what, huh?
It's putting the onus on you and not God.
So
That's you having faith. It doesn't depend on him.
But so the Lutheran answer is have faith in God, meaning his will, his timing, him to work it out. I can't see the whole big picture.
Right.
I don't know if it's that person's time to go home, or how God could possibly use that sickness to his glory. And all things come to, or work together for his will. But, what I want, then that's putting the onus on me. What I want, I read the scriptures, like Jesus healed people. That's available, so, and I want that person healed really bad, but then it all becomes about my faith.
But we should always go to God and ask him, because that shows him that we know that he's the one that provides.
Thank you. 'Cause
Well,
this has been a
and
real
what do
tough
we
one for me.
what do we wind up praying? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. So you question, how does that come within his will? And even though sometimes it seems like it doesn't, you don't know.
Yeah.
I think I've told part of the story anyway. I had a friend of mine whose wife died last year. A friend of mine from high school, his wife got cancer. Went out to the funeral. A friend of mine from high school, so I've known him a long time. And in talking with him at the funeral and stuff, a lot of stories came up about how when she was sick in her final days, she's at the hospital, but she was really, when you hear the term prayer warrior, that's what she was, that's what she is. And everybody who came to visit her in her hospital room, it would become a matter of, what can I pray for you? Not them for her, but her for them. And they were talking and telling stories about the fact that, there'd be a lineup because people would come to visit her, but she wanted to make sure she prayed for everybody, so they'd have to wait until she got through people. And it was like, wow. It obviously touched a lot of people. And it was just sort of amazing. And you're like, how can cancer work to God's glory? And it's like, yep, it sucks. It absolutely, positively sucked. My friend, we're all around 50-ish. So it's like, really? It sort of shook my brain a little bit. But it worked. Word was spread, prayers were given, people encountered God at that point. Was it the best way to do it? I don't know. No. My answer is going to be no. It sucked. It was awful. But did it bring glory to God? Probably. I can't see the whole plan. I can't see the whole thing. I don't want to sit here and say, wow, it was great you suffered, because, yeah, well, you. But I'm still talking about it, and I'm sure other people who actually were there when it was happening are still encountering it. And I'm sure now she's praying up in heaven too for people. So I would sure, as the saints of God are praying before God, she's continuing. All right. Then we go through, Jesus foretells his death again. In case you missed it the first time, hey, I have to die. Once again, we're not living in a prosperity gospel. We're living in a gospel of sacrifice and love. Finally, this little story about the temple tax. In case you missed the story before about who he was, I mean, he is the Messiah, but Jesus asked this really stupid question. Who gets taxed? The sons? Does a king tax his own sons, or does he tax other people? And what's the answer?
Taxes others.
Right. Yet Jesus here, he is the Son. Who owns the earth and all that is on it? God. It all belongs to God. Why would the Son, especially if this is a temple tax, if some of this is going to the temple, why the heck would the temple be taxing Jesus? That's a little silly. Why would it be taxing anybody? You can't tax your children. I mean, I suppose you can, but would not be common purpose. So his point is, I am the Son. I am the Son, just so you are not confused. I am the Son. But then he says, so as not to cause offense, so as not to press this point too early before it's time, go ahead, get you a fish. Fish will pay it. Pay it for you and for me, for Peter and for him. The other 11, they got to figure that out on their own. I don't know why he only paid for Peter, but that's okay. Peter was taken care of. So this section, the great section about faith and who that faith is in, that's been this whole section. Now, next week, we will get into the fourth discourse, including chapter 18 of Matthew, everybody's favorite chapter, church discipline, how we discipline others. But I don't think the whole section's about discipline. The whole section really will be talking about forgiveness, how the church works. And the big core word at that point will be forgiveness. All right, does anybody have any questions on faith that are answerable anytime in the next? All right, if everybody's good, why don't we close with a word of prayer. Father, thank you. Thank you for what you've done for us. Thank you for what we continue to receive from you day in and day out. And we know that, like the apostles, like your disciples at the time, we too walk around with little faith. Please continue to strengthen us, guide us. Give us your strength, your faithfulness, that we can truly serve you better here, that we can come to know you more. Be with us as we come back this Sunday. Bless the pastor as he prepares your word for us. Prepare our hearts to receive you in word and in the sacrament. Father, just bless us now as we go from this place out into the world. I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.